Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Performance Talk. My name is Yul Gordon. Don't mind me. My cohort is not here with me today, so I will be introducing the guest. And I always, and I mean, how about I just do it like this? Our guest today will introduce himself and tell us what he's up to now and how he got there.
All right, so I am Ryan Banta. I am the author of the Sprinter's Compendium. I am also the head girls track and field coach at Parkway Central High School and have been so for about 20 years. I also coach cross country there, and I'm a social studies teacher. I teach advanced placement human geography, and we've been very, very blessed to have a lot of talented kids at my school, and I've gotten an opportunity to shepherd that talent. We've been in the top 5 in the state of Missouri 8 times in the last 14 years. We've won numerous district titles and conference championships. And what I think, when people evaluate our program, they always look at our high-end athletes, which we've had a few. But I think the meat and crust of what we do is the culture that builds a program that year in and year out, we reload instead of rebuild, and we've built a culture of athletic excellence in a particular community that's not very athletically inclined. And I'm pretty proud of that and gotten an opportunity to do that at my old high school where I went as an athlete as well. And we won our first women's state title at our high school in any sport in 2002
Oh,
since
all
the
right.
1980s. Yeah.
Getting and we all know anybody that has any experience with track athletes and track meets or whatever the case may be, we know that getting points from in track meets from unexpected athletes is that's like a high. When you're
Absolutely.
when the athletes you say won't haven't placed in the hurdles this year, but they've been doing well, and all of a sudden you get third place points from them. That's that's man, you can't really beat that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's
So,
one of those things where you need everybody to be pulling in the same way. And I think people don't really understand. They look at track and field as being a genetically dispositioned sport. Either you have
oh,
people or not. And what people don't
right,
realize is it really requires a lot. Like in the state of Missouri, we have 19 events that we contest at a state championship, and
right,
outside of the relays, you get 2 individuals in each one of those events and then 4 in the relays. So it
right.
requires a lot of people, a lot of coordination, a lot of sharing with programs, not just inside the track and field program, but with football and basketball and,
Right.
and all that.
Yeah, that is you know, and I don't know if you know him, but I'm gonna represent my high school there, Lexington High School, and Coach Tom Beck, who is I believe well I know he's a high school Hall of Famer, and he might be a Hall of Famer there in Missouri too. I'm not sure. I need to check that before I say that, but he excellent coach, similar track record like yours. He's an older guy because I'm an old guy, so he was coaching me. So he's a little bit older than us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like I said, when you come into let's go all the way back to the beginning of this. When you walk in to this profession, performance we call it now.
Sure.
It used to be individualized, and we called it track coach and all that stuff. But you're generally a performance coach. You're teaching speed, and I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, where you said, "Oh, everybody thinks that's a genetic predisposition for any track athlete." But tell our audience how you train. Just basic from the beginning, how you train speed.
So the biggest thing is everyone can get faster. I had a large, lengthy, exacerbating discussion with a
Yeah,
with a former coach who basically said, "Well, a good coach is only good if they have great athletes." I said, "But every building has great athletes. You got to
yeah,
recruit them, you got to get them out, you got to identify them, and then once they're in your program, then you got to go further to identify strengths, weaknesses,
develop. Yeah,
yeah, the best event that they can do, And so we do a series of tests to figure out like what is the athlete I'm working with. And I have longitudinal data of almost 20 years now of flying 30s, standing long jump, standing 5 repeat bound jumps, overhead back shot put toss, softball toss because we have javelin in
Yeah.
Missouri. We have
Right.
a gymnastic skills challenge. We have a 800-meter run challenge, hurdle challenge. Gosh, what else do we have out of that? That's pretty much the gamut of our first 2 days of practice. We kind of treat it like a combine. And then from that data that I get, then I can start to piece together a radar graph with all of their performances and where they rank
Oh
amongst the
wow.
100
Yeah.
greatest athletes I've had at Parkway Central. And then you start to see clarity through that data to go, I think this kid is probably going to be this. I think this kid is probably pretty good at this. I think these are weaknesses. And then you start to prescribe training based on all of that data. So, for example, I've got in my top 30 flying 30s, all of those kids have turned out to be all state or state qualifiers, with the exception of kids who didn't come back for 2 years. So it takes a while to develop
Right.
speed, right?
Right.
So it's not a one and done situation. And it could be, but like to get the best out of the best, it still requires time. So you need to figure out like strategically, okay, hey, this kid's really good at these things. Is that a great advantage for them? Can we shore up this part of their race or something flawed in their mechanics? And so the biggest thing that we see typically, the lowest hanging fruit, is that most kids are very immobile. So they don't have good dynamic or static flexibility.
Right.
And they have
Right.
terrible mechanics. Terrible
Woo.
mechanics.
Man, you can say that over and over and over again. But I think it goes back to that coach or that athlete or that parent saying, "Well, if they can run, if they're fast, they're just fast. That's just natural." Well, okay, but if you want to compete, especially in today's athletic world, all the way down to the high school level, you better be talking about some kind of body alignment, some kind of
Mm-hmm.
flexibility and mobility,
Mm-hmm.
and not only that, going out there and spending the time to get all the little techniques as good as you can get them.
Correct. And the thing that people don't understand, I'm going to give you two stats and people can, they can have receipts on me. But once a person reaches, let's say, world class status, they are still under about 8.5 years till they reach their actual personal best pinnacle. We're talking Usain Bolt, Justin
Yeah,
Gatlin, Tyson
yeah,
Gay. It still
yeah,
took them from world class times eight and a
yeah.
half years to reach what would be their personal best, which are some of the fastest times in the world. And then when someone has learned mechanically, neurologically, have picked up bad habits through whatever sports they had done when they were
Yeah.
younger, it takes 500 hours of dedicated training to create a new neural pathway that becomes the new them. So when people are like, well, you just have speedy people. Yeah, I had some speedy people who are now a lot faster and a lot more
Right.
robust and a lot less injury prone. And all of those factors combined, come together to create a better overall athlete. I take pride in the fact that like over by you guys in Kansas City, there's a very famous Division II program called Northwest Missouri State. And I coached a young
Which
man
which
who
which one was
Nor-
that?
Northwest Missouri State. They're
Oh
like the
yeah, yeah,
Big Ten
yeah, yeah,
perennial champions over there
yeah,
in
yeah,
Maryville, Missouri.
yeah.
And I had a guy who was in my program who we used to call Fluffy because he was soft. It wasn't an ironic name at all. And by the time he was a senior in high school and then went on to Northwest Missouri State, which is the best Division II football program year in and year out, he set multiple offensive lineman records for speed and power. So even though he's not going to win the 100-meter dash, you need that
Right,
guy to pull on a trap. You need that guy to hook a defensive end for a quick pitch. There's
right.
no one who's going to beat him from those 5 feet ever. So
Well,
that's what people need to understand about speed. And sometimes you have these even distributions of improvement. So you're working and working and working and you don't see something, but you're attacking all those biomotor abilities.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, all those things come together. The formula finally figured it out. And then you have this new person that never did you expect necessarily 5, 6 years ago that you were working with would transform into this different human. But that's why we do all of those things and strategically attack all of those things so that over time we can see career development, not shortchanged, quick grab performance improvements and then feel like we're really great. But then what we've done is ruined the future development for that athlete.
Right. I've seen many athletes. I think I was one of these athletes that I was far better in collegiately than I was in high school. Now, being a smaller guy that played football, that presented some challenges. But from a preparation standpoint, the ability to deal with preparation and be consistent, that's what got me that far. And I see that with a lot of athletes today. The ones that just keep pushing, just keep working. And everybody says, well, working hard. Well, it's I think you can attest to this. You can work hard as long as you want and as hard as you want and as consistently as you want to. But if you're working hard at the wrong thing, you
Yeah,
kind of you kind of not you kind of running on ice.
for sure. And I don't want people spinning their wheels. And the problem is that we have too many people who are dogmatic, and because of that, they can't cross that line. They've become siloed, and it's like, well, I'm all speed all the time. There's no value in tempo, or there's
Yeah,
no value in aerobic work, or you can do all that speed work, but then you're never going to be prepared to handle the rigors of a state championship that's 2 days in a row and
right,
people don't realize that it's all of those things. You should be
right.
doing all of those things
Everything.
all the time in its place, and then during different parts of the year things get
Yeah,
emphasized. Yeah.
you know, you know, some of our compadres and our fellow strength conditioning performance guys. They said, "Well, what kind of periodization do you use? What kind of whatever you use?" I said, "I do everything all the time, just like you said. I do everything all the time." Well, how can you do that? I said, "Well, I fundamentally, for any athlete, there's in season, postseason, you know, off season, and preseason. Those are the three things or the four things you have. So we focus something different at each one of those points, but you can't leave something out. You can't just do the speed and the agility work and not do the strength work. You can't just do the strength stuff and never work on movement or linear speed. If you do those things, then you have an athlete that's out of balance, and then that's when injuries and stuff start to show up.
Exactly. And what I found with that is that people want to rush a metric that they're comfortable with. So there might be a guy who's very, educated and has good progressions in Olympic lifting.
Right,
And then there's a guy who's very educated and very smart about full speed training. And then
right,
there's guys who are mobility guys. And
right,
so there's these things that people emphasize that's kind of their thing. It's their brand. And my
right.
brand is building a robust global athlete that can do a lot of things, and then at different points of the year we emphasize the thing that's most important, but not at the detriment of good sound global training. Like Dan Path, who's basically in your area, not too far up
Right.
the road from you now, one of the things that he talks about all the time is a perfect system is an easily broken system because it cannot respond to the realities of a human being, life, accidents, weather. So what you want is
Oh
somebody who's
man.
robust, who can kind of
Right.
deal with a day that's cold, that can deal with a day of having some dead legs due to a new phase of weightlifting, can
Right.
deal with, having a huge new PR and the effect on the body, to be patient enough to know, like, okay, now I can't push the envelope. I've got to
Right.
stabilize the new me. So those things are really important that I think a lot of people with their dogmatic attitudes don't quite get. And like periodization schemes, you and I probably use a number of different periodization schemes for the particular athlete for the
Yeah.
particular time of year. That's why
Yeah.
it's good to know the classics,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. The one of the big things that I hear a lot of today coaches and strength people and performance people talking about is resilience. What I always ask, well, what is resilience to you? So, coach, answer that question for us. What is resilience to you?
So resilience to me is the people that have enough ability to handle the requisite training to produce the means that I need for high performance. And then being able to handle high performance without being wrecked so that the next week's training cannot be completed.
Hey, we've seen that, haven't we?
Yeah,
We've seen where there's a meet or a game or an activity or whatever, and that athlete goes into that and they do great, but they you don't see them until Wednesday
correct.
of the
Correct.
next week. So
And we see that in the NFL all the time because nobody wants to injure somebody in practice. But the problem is that you create what I call this disparity between preparation and performance.
right,
And the bigger or the larger the stretch between preparation and performance there is, the higher chance of a catastrophic injury,
ooh,
you know?
say that again, coach. I think our audience needs to hear you say that one more time.
So as you stretch out performance and preparation, you
Yes,
increase the percentage of chance of a catastrophic injury. You can go there once, you might be able to go there twice, and everybody's really excited about how well you're doing. And
right.
then all of a sudden, that lack of resilience, that lack of what I call fitness specific to the sport, will eventually catch up with you, and you're going to have a major problem. You're going to have an ACL, an Achilles, a hamstring. And we have so many non contact injuries in the NFL because no one's doing any work anymore. Michael Jordan in the NBA, other than the year he broke his foot, which he was still playing games at North Carolina with college kids, even though he wasn't
Yeah,
allowed to play in the NBA, he was still playing games that year. But other than that, he had averaged 75 games a year for the lion's share or more of his career. He never came off the court, and he was a high flyer. He's getting hit, he's getting contacted, and he was able to survive. And now we
I,
have guys that don't even muster up the strength to go play a basketball game because they hurt their back a year and a half ago,
yeah,
because they have no robustness. And part of that is a lack of developmental multi sport experience, right? So, like, all of these
yep,
kids are playing AAU right away, or the football dudes in Texas are doing 7-on-7,
yeah.
after the season is over, and they're never moving in multi directions, right? Or you got kids that are just doing track and they're doing nothing else. And the reality is that we want multi-sport athletes because that multi-sport experience creates a global athlete that then can be supported by high performance coaches like us. And then, of course, once they get to achieve adulthood and they have robust tendons and ligaments and connective tissue and a great developed neural network that can fire in all sorts of patterns, they're going to be a better overall athlete with a higher peak.
See that neuromuscular um, facilitation and that neuromuscular patterning that you're discussing right now is like my next little block. But without robustness, you can't even get to that level of training because that's a different feeling to the athlete of training. It's not just just running. It's trying to get to connect all your nervous system together to not only react but react and respond. And everybody says, well, that's the same thing. No, reaction is when you realize you have to do something. Your response is what movement or whatever you do to that. So a lot of times guys can, I see guys that, and girls that get, to be fair, that, man, they react to a start when they know they're supposed to start, but they don't respond to it. They don't move.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
their heads ducking or their arms moving. They're reacting to the gun, but you
Right.
didn't push out of the blocks.
Yeah, it's like throwing a slap versus throwing an uppercut. Like, both can be fast, but one way more likely is going to knock you
Yeah,
out if it connects.
right,
And I feel like a lot of times people are in a rush, to do certain things, or they're very neurally great. That zero step's great, but then they can do nothing with it. Well, then if I saw that as a coach, well, then my job is to prescribe training to deal with the absence of action after a reaction.
right,
And so that would be like a sled pull, a sled push, a vest, depth jumps, into a full
right,
out sprint. There's all sorts of programming that we can apply to deal with that. And the other thing I think is a big mistake from high performance folks and people like that want to, they want to do the fun, sexy stuff because that's what gets you people to keep coming back to you. And that's great. But if the kid can't land on their feet correctly, if they
Woo.
can't push correctly, they can't get their leg in a position where their knee is at their belly button at full
Yes,
speed.
yes,
They've got
yes,
terrible backside mechanics. Like we can
yes,
do all of this other really cute, very interesting, sexy training, but you still don't know how to squat. You still don't know how to run
right.
well at full speed. And that's the thing people got to watch out for too. It's like, hey, again, you look really fast in a flying 10 on the clock, but if I watch you run, you look horrible. And
Right.
again, you're like redlining the engine. It's like in Fast and
Exactly.
Furious, you can only
Yeah.
take that nos in
Yeah.
the engine for so long.
Yeah. The when we talk about redlining and the engine there, and I have often seen that um, together with just all over the world mechanics with I call technique, personally, I call technique what is happening with the limbs, the extremities. I call form, you know, head, chest, and hips. So if I'm looking at form, somebody's running form, I want to see where they are. Where's your head? Where's your chest? Where are your hips? Technique wise, wow. There's just a lot of folks out there that don't get it. That you can't be all over the place technique wise, even if your form is great. You look good here. Now everybody has their little twist, but go ahead, coach.
Yeah, and I mean, there's going to be amorphically things that are going to look different. So a
Right.
guy like Maurice Green is going to apply a strategy to running a 100-meter dash that's going to look very different than a guy like Usain Bolt.
Exactly.
And so there's going to be some uniqueness there that we don't want to mess with to ruin the athlete, especially something where it's drastic. Like I always talk about these progressions should have, when we talk about periodization, it's like, okay, hey, I want to bench. All right, great. Now I want to bench with velocity based training. Now I want the bench to be ballistic. Now I want the bench to be proprioceptive. So we're still benching. Or it's like, hey, I
Right.
still want to do an A skip, but now I want to do an A skip into a B skip. Or I want to do an A skip into an A run. So it's this idea of like attacking some of these things with progression in mind, but not going, okay, we're just not going to A skip, we're only going to B skip, or we're only going to retro run, on in these occasions, or we're only going to straight leg bound. It's like, no. You need to be doing all of these things in some sort of concert with each other. And then you got to feel like you said, it's either proximal or it's distal, right? So
Right.
proximal, hips, head, chest, right? The center of mass. And then distal, what's the arms, feet,
Right.
the extension of those actions. What does it look at full extension? Is there something that's dragging this athlete back? Like you could look at, Holloway and the 110 hurdles, and he's got some oddities that he does, but that guy's pretty darn good and has won quite a bit,
Yeah.
And then there's some things where it's like pretty obvious, and it
Yeah.
would be like, there's this young lady from Poland named Swoboda, and she's PR'd a number of times this year. And so people are really excited for, in Poland, how fast she's become. But I still look at her popping up after 2 steps,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm like, gosh darn it, if somebody would just take care of that. And even more to the point, Shelly Ann Fraser Price, when she won her first Olympic title in 2008, she looked, well, first of all, she was a kid, but she looked like a little kid racing her neighbors
Right.
in the street, on a
Right.
summer
Right.
day,
Right.
and she's just vastly better, and now
Right.
you look at Shelly Ann Fraser Price and she's still winning medals as an old woman in sprinting because she's mechanically sound. If you would see her
There you
from
go.
'08 to Doha when she won the world championship, it's almost mechanically. So like you said, posture and, technique, right? It's almost a completely different human being in a completely different pattern. But she dedicated herself to getting better at her craft with something that people think is so simple as running. And that's the
Yeah.
only reason why she's been able to stay in the game for as long as she
Well,
has.
well, one of the things, and that's a good point, and it leads right to this. You see a lot of football players come combine time, they go away, drop 15 pounds, and work nothing but linear sprints so they can run a 40. But then they come back to a pro day and they can't move because it's all movement there. It's
Right.
all change of direction. It's all stop and start. It's all this. If you've already ran a 40, they don't care to see another 40 from you.
Right.
But they're going to see how you move and they're going to challenge you. And I've seen some number one draft picks or some first round draft picks. Personally, I'm standing there, come to the pro day, and look horrible,
Yeah. Yeah.
horrible. And then there's been a couple over the years that I said he's going to have an injury. It's going to look like it's going to happen like this, and this is why. And
Mm-hmm.
then 18 months later, it happens like that. But there's some things you can. I guess what I'm trying to say to our listeners is there's some things coaches, especially good coaches, can see, and good coaches are not going to make wholesale changes.
Right.
You're not going to go in there and say, "Oh, you don't move like it says you're supposed to move in the textbook," because all you're going to get is a robot at that point. And I don't know if that's worse than
Right.
just letting them do what they were doing before.
Right.
So so with that said, let's go ahead and progress into that topic a little bit, and the topic being, how often do you get to talk with other coaches from other sports and they say, "Hey, coach, what do I need to do to get X faster, or get Joe or Susie or whoever faster on the soccer team?" Because I worked with several soccer teams, but
Mm-hmm.
mostly females, and the big misconception was that they need to go out and run marathons and half
Mm-hmm.
marathons, and I'm like, I said, that's not going to get you a soccer player, coach. There's a lot of explosiveness on the soccer field and a lot of change of direction. So you might want to look at something else. Sometimes I got a great reception. Sometimes I got ran off the field. So
Well, and I think that the problem is number one, the sports coach of a ball sport or of a team sport has to actually honor the basic tenets of how people get faster, which
right,
means you gotta dedicate actual time to full speed motion with appropriate recovery, right, and appropriate mechanics, and it has to be placed in a part of practice where you're actually able to perform it. If you're trying to do it at the end of a practice, you're
woo,
not getting faster. If you're trying to
no,
do it with very short recoveries, it's not a speed thing. And the other thing is that people don't understand that the game of football, the game of soccer, usually is enough of the aerobic work. What you want to do is raise the floor of their speed so that it doesn't take as much out of them when they're hitting close to a maximal effort as it does, again, because the disparity between training and preparation.
Right.
And, like in football, what are we looking at? We're looking at repeat 40s, repeat 50s if you're a wide receiver over and
Right.
over and over again. The other
Repeat
problem
tens.
is, yeah, yeah. And the other problem is when we look at like the glorification of the weird, maze running around cones and all that kind of stuff. And I remember, and I used to coach football at Central High School as well. And I was a strength and conditioning coach and the running backs coach. And in the years that I coached the football team, we took a freshman squad that was 1-6-1 because they only let us play 8 games when they're
Right.
freshmen. And I moved up with them as they moved up, became a varsity coach when they were juniors, and we went on to the state championship. And all of those guys started, and all of those guys went both ways, and they were terrible as freshmen. But what did I tell them? I'm like, in the summer, we are not going to do a lot of agility work. We are not going to do a lot of football drill work. My job
Yeah.
is to make you faster, and my job is to make you more resilient, and my job is to make you more mobile. Things that are going to allow you to survive so that if you're going from point A to point B, you don't have to worry about doing some crazy bust a move MC Hammer old school dance to get around these
They get-
dudes because
yeah.
you're going to slap them once, rip once,
Look,
you're going to be past them.
I work with a couple of really great athletes in South Carolina. Went to Clemson and old school Clemson. I'm talking about early 2000s and the teens. And these guys said, "Coach, the best thing you did for us is not teach us all that fancy footwork, all that stuff, because he said once you get out there, it doesn't mean anything." And I'm like, well, okay. Once you
Preach.
react,
Yeah.
once you react, once you react, if you're not responding, if you're not already moving, you're beat anyway.
Right.
On a on a
Right.
on a football field, on a basketball court, on a soccer field, if you're just out there doing all that stuff and you're in a 3 yard box, I'm going to coach my guys to just let you do that until you decide you want to move.
Right. Right.
Then
And it's
react
and
and
it's one of
respond.
those yeah, and it's one of those things that I think oftentimes gets mixed up, like with basketball, like they look at Steph Curry and they look at how much he runs and they're like, well, then we should do the minimum of that running. No, 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 no. He's already going to do that through the game of basketball. Your job is to make that work less demanding through them being able to be
Exactly.
faster, easier, more explosive, easier, so it doesn't require as much effort to get to the same point A to point B situation. And in soccer, it drives me nuts because, first of all, they spend so much money to do so many things wrong. Like I have a young lady who's on my cross country team and she plays soccer for our school, so she's not on the track squad. It's in the same season in Missouri in the
Right.
spring. But she played 6 soccer games in a weekend. That's
Yeah.
child abuse. Why?
Yeah.
How are you playing that?
No recovery time.
Yeah.
No nothing. It's I. But it's almost like if you don't like I held my daughter out of a summer soccer season one time, and the coach punished her for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I said she was injured. She got injured during the school season.
Right.
She never rested it. I would be not only as a parent negligent, but as a professional negligent.
Right. Yeah.
Who at that time I was doing strength and conditioning and athletic training, and so I would have been negligent as a professional to let her go back out there with those injuries.
Yeah.
But the coach disagreed with me, and that's okay. I mean, I think in today's that was 15, 20 years ago, 20 years ago. So in today's world, I think there would have been a little more paying attention to that, but back then it wasn't. You
And
know,
it's
and
unfortunate. It's unfortunate because, we're shortchanging the development of these young
exactly,
people.
exactly.
I have a lot of young ladies who tell me, "Well, I'm not going to play basketball this year, coach, because I'm going to come out and train." I'm like, "No, you're not." What do you mean? I go, "You need to play basketball first and foremost because you're a good athlete and the team needs you. Also, it makes me look bad that you're quitting them for me. And then I know that I'm just an excuse 9 times out of 10 for you to just go work over the winter and hang out with your boyfriend and occasionally show up and train with me. I would much rather you play a full basketball season,
But
then come see me for track, and then do whatever you're going to do in the summer and whatever you're going to do in the fall. But have a point where, okay, we're going to move on to something else and get away from that. And if a coach says that to you, first of all, you're being very kind and generous. I'm sure there were some choice words I would have said when it's my daughter, But it's one of those things, like, these kids need to have a lot of experiences, and it's wild how much money is spent on travel baseball, travel soccer. And we have so many kids that are like, "Oh, I'm playing in this, nationals, and I'm in this showcase, and I'm an All-American." And I'm thinking, well, if we have all these many All-Americans and showcase kids, like, we probably should win state, like, every year in soccer. And the reality is that there are those people who are that good, who are really that level of a soccer player, football
right,
player, or basketball player. But everybody else is supplementing the commerce of select sports and AAU
right,
sports. They're ones backfilling all of the actual really great athletes who back in the day would have been the only people on a select team, where now
right.
everybody's on a select team.
Yeah, and then you sound like me in a way with that. Is like, how can all nine of these teams in this geographical area be select or be all star? You got nine
Right.
all star teams.
Right.
You have a league. That's what they
Right.
call those.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and basically, like, the only kids that aren't making the team are the kids who either don't have the money to pay to
Right,
stay on the program, or they're the kids that show up in jeans for baseball tryouts. It's like
right,
that kind of thing. It's like the obvious kid who's
right.
has no, unfortunately, was not gifted by their parents with very many redeemable athletic skills.
Right, and for those guys, there's the park leagues. Go
Correct.
have go have fun, man. Don't worry about this stuff. Go have fun. There's not enough for me. Uh, I'm not a clown by any stretch of the imagination, but I have fun with my kids, with the kids when I'm out there. Even the pros I've worked with, we're out there training. You have to. There has to be a reason why they're coming to train with you.
Right.
And if you make it drudgery and punishment and pain and all those things, you're not going to get the kids' attention or the athletes' attention. So let's talk about that psychological part, Coach,
Sure.
and how you use that in your maneuvers to work with teams and kids.
Absolutely. So I got my master's in positive psychology and performance from the University of Missouri. Gosh,
Yeah.
what was it? The summer of 2019, I think. And I went into that master's because I do teach social studies, so it is a useful master's for that if I ever have to teach AP Psych or anything. But the
Right.
biggest thing is I wanted to learn how to build relationships with kids who normally I might not be able to reach and teach. And part of that is, how do you package the things they need to hear? How do you present it in a way that they can take ownership? How do you convince them of the things that you're seeing and the things that they need to be successful? And then on top of that, since COVID, the amount of mental health and anxiety and the obsessiveness of the cell phone and the hours of doom scrolling, we have
Doom
to,
scrolling. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, we have to
Yeah.
inoculate these kids from that. And there's a lot of stuff. So, like, I remember I talked to this guy, and he's like considered like the godfather of positive psychology. And I remember I
Okay.
went to him and I'm like, hey man, like I really need like, can you give me some activities or skills, like hard stuff? I need the stuff that these kids can practice. Because the problem is people don't understand. Just like getting faster, it takes a long time, right? So like, let me
Come
give
on
you,
now.
yeah, let me give you a little scheme. So you can get more flexible every day. Super easy. Like I can make a person literally more flexible for the rest of their life in one session. Now they have to keep doing it, but you can do it
Right.
in one day. You can make a person more endurance based or have improved work capacity week to week. You can make a person
Right.
stronger month to month. You can make a
Right.
person faster year to year. And then the fifth thing that people don't often talk about is resilience and grit. That takes a decade to decade. So by the time you have the wily veteran in his mid 30s, then all of these other things probably have deceived him or her and have gone
Starting to go
down.
down. Yeah.
Right, but they can stay in the game because they're the wily veteran and they don't let stuff shake them. They don't let media, non-important relationships, nonsense, distract them from the goals of whatever they want to accomplish in performance. And not everybody's
Right.
built for that to ever get there. And
Right.
oftentimes when we're finally there as the sage on the mountaintop, we no longer have the athletic prowess to do it at a high
Right.
level, right? We still have the
Right.
land strength and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And so for me, I realize that like my face and the way that I look,
Yeah.
is not always the most appealing or pleasant. I look mad when I'm not manically laughing or smiling at
Right.
people. And
Right.
so like during COVID, when we had masks up on our face like this, I would tell jokes and kids would not laugh for like, and I mean, the person who tells you they're funny, they're not usually funny. I'm pretty
Uh,
funny in a classroom setting,
ah,
and I'm not getting the laughs, and I'm like, man, what's going on? And I realize, oh yeah,
rough.
these eyes don't emote the
Right.
same thing that's going
Yeah.
down here. That they don't know to be cued to laugh, or that I'm being facetious or I'm kidding around. And so what I realized is a lot of athletes have only the resilience and experience that they have in positive sports psychology based on previous successes or resilience that they had built over time. So without those things, then you have to create a scheme for them to reshape how they think. So like we go through scenarios in our practices. Hey, this happens. What are you going to say to yourself? How are you going to attack it? How are you going to respond? You're going to feel this way. This is what you're actually feeling. You're feeling excitement, not nervousness. Do
Right.
you have a go to mantra that you can say to yourself, a short series of words or statements that you absolutely know are true? How do you handle the 24 hours before a major competition to inoculate yourself from the unrealistic concern, worries, and anxieties that will only exist at that moment and then will disappear after it? Can you prepare yourself to see it coming and know it's coming? So we have like a 24-hour taper that we do before major competitions. So they have to do
Okay.
like, while they're awake, they have to do something positive in every hour of the day that they're awake. So that could be listen to Kevin Hart's funny skit that he did, some comedy routine. Read a poem from your favorite poet. Listen to your absolute favorite song. Call a relative or text a relative and tell them you love them. So it's all of these little things that won't interrupt the day or get them in trouble in school that they can do that just floods them with positivity, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
I like it.
yeah, and so we practice all of that stuff. And then we talk about like, nutrition and not like what less you can eat, but that like food is not the enemy. Food is meant
Right.
to be enjoyed. I want you to eat more and more things, not
Yeah.
less. Like a lot of kids that we have, especially in my sport, coaching women, we have an
Ooh.
issue with eating, right? And that
Yeah.
food becomes an enemy. And then in a lot of their world, they might not have agency because they're not in charge at home. They might have multiple
Right.
siblings, or they might have friends who kind of run the crew,
Right.
amongst their girls. So the only thing that they have control over is what they put in their mouth. And so then all of a sudden we become restrictive in our diets. We become vegans, we become vegetarians, we go on a caloric deficit. I've had a number of young ladies who have come out and said, "Hey, can I just train? I don't really want to race." And I'm like, "No." I said, "You're going to get fit, but you're going to compete." I said, "This is about a competition. I am not a personal trainer in the season.
Right.
I am your coach, and we're going to find out how good you are. And it's okay to feel that pressure." We always talk about the line, oh gosh, it's the famous tennis player, woman tennis player. She did the Battle of the Sexes back in the
Oh, Billie
70s.
Jean King.
Yeah, Billie Jean King. Thank you. And
Yeah.
she talks about pressure is a privilege. Damn it, it is a privilege.
Well,
It's
you,
privilege to know the stress and the vibes and the energy of really figuring out when something's important to you. How do you perform amidst that arousal, that energy, and that excitement?
and you know what, man? It's sometimes it's a shame that we don't get to learn that stuff until, like you said earlier, we're past our prime, way past, in my case, way past my prime. But so you look for, when you hear athletes talking about looking for something else to take the place of that, they're looking for being dependent on that pressure, and then coming through at that time.
Right.
So the psychological part of preparation for me was always easy, but I learned when I started working with others, that part was not always easy. So what you do, especially at the high school level, just first of all getting them to be positive about what they're doing all day. That's a great
Right.
step. That's a great step, because that's going to flow right into to practice, basically, or right
Yeah.
into competition. I don't know one person that's been positive all day long without a, a big train wreck or something happening, that at the end of the day is not positive anymore.
Right. Right. Well, and then
So
that's where, and it takes time, like, and depending on the level of trauma. And I try to like, I got a lot of privileged people I work with on a regular basis. We're in a affluent school district with very well-to-do people in the state of Missouri, and so sometimes, like, and then we have the most diverse school, economically diverse, racially diverse, religiously diverse.
okay.
We have more languages than any other school present in our high school.
So
It's
what county is that?
I'm in St. Louis County. I'm in West County, so we're about
Okay.
15
Okay.
miles out from the Arch, and we're in the Parkway School District, and we have a very, very diverse population, and we still have voluntary transfer. So we have kids that travel in from the city to come out to the county schools through the desegregation program from the 1980s. I think it
Oh
was
yeah. Wow.
a Board versus Hazelwood or whatever it was back in the day.
Yeah.
So we have that unique experience, but I also have to remember, like, some of my kids, like, false starting in a race is like the worst thing that's ever happened to them, or being told no by a coach is the most extreme difficulty
Right.
they've ever faced. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Adversity, man.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's other people who have, like, their relatives shot, and they're supposed
Yeah.
to go and compete the next week,
Right.
and it's like, and so what's so wild is you only know what you've experienced and what you know, but we have to prepare people to navigate those things, that they have options in the unknown, that they at least can attempt to work their way out of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, coach.
No, I was just gonna say, I was thinking about the over there where you live, and I was thinking, okay, boy, that is a without the guys getting bust in, that is kind of a triangle of just folks coming in. Would you say economically diverse, social and economically diverse, financially diverse, racially diverse? I bet there's even some, because you're out in the county, right?
Absolutely.
So there's even some geographical diversity with kids coming in from the country?
Yeah, so I mean,
From,
we've got suburban kids, we've got kids that live in $1 million mansions, we have
right,
kids that are living in public housing,
right.
and we have kids that live in condos and apartments, and we have kids who also get brought in from different parts of our school district because their English is a second language. So you've
Ah,
got a
yeah.
lot of people coming from
So,
very different communities. And we have like our school district covers the largest geographical footprint of any
right.
school. So there are
Okay.
some people that like still have like houses that are kind of in a rural-ish area, even though
Yeah.
way
That's.
different now than it was. There was
Oh
more of
yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
30
Yeah.
years ago as we
Right.
built out and had urban sprawl, you know.
But no, I can imagine that would be pretty interesting. So as we start to creep towards the end, I'm going to ask you usually our last question first.
Sure.
But I got two more, and you can expound on these as much as you want. The first one, I'm gonna give you the our normal last question, but I want you to be able to think about it a little bit. What athlete, or if you had to choose an athlete from any sport, not a person, just an athlete from any sport that could go into another sport and do well, what athlete would that be? Would it be a, say soccer player at the midfield? Would it be a rugby player on the wing? Would it be who is the most suited to go into any sport and do well? There's no right or wrong answer.
Okay. You want me to answer that right now or do you want me
Yeah.
to wait? Okay, you want me to answer that right now. So I always, I mean, the best athletes in your school are your basketball players, hands down.
Okay.
They're tall, they're rangy, they have pretty darn good cardio, they have great agility, they can run and jump for days. Any kid who comes out from basketball to my track and field team, again, 19 times out of 20, is in better shape than even the kids who train with me all the time. They need very little blending into it, where other sports require a lot of blending and smoothing out the transition from one sport to another.
Okay.
They're usually very athletic. And like I look at today, we were in the cardio room before you and I got on to talk because I was cross training my rookies because I do that with my rookies. We twice a week cross train to take them off of their feet for cross country so that they can
Okay.
recover. Because we rather them be a little less prepared but continue to be in our program for more than 1 year, going all the way
Exactly.
back to that data that I was talking about.
Right.
And I'm looking at all the basketball dudes who are just playing basketball. And I'm like, that guy right there is a tight end. That guy's a middle linebacker. That guy's a defensive tackle. That guy's probably a running back or a flanker on the football team. That guy's probably a shortstop in the baseball program. And these guys are very athletic, but they've spent a lot of time just playing this one thing. And even though that means they have the potential to help a lot of other programs, they oftentimes don't. And then, thus, because they only play basketball, they accumulate basketball related injuries, which actually shortchanges the thing that they've been spending all their time focusing on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basketball, and what position would that basketball player play?
Oh, absolutely a short forward or power forward because those guys can do everything.
Okay.
Right? Like that guy could be a power hitter in first base. That guy could be, a mid range guy in rugby. That guy could be an elite goalie on a soccer team. That guy
Okay.
could, obviously be a great track and field athlete, maybe a thrower, maybe a hurdler, depending on how sinewy they are and how quick they are.
We
They
we
could
we
play
had some.
volleyball.
Yeah, we had some state championship jumpers that were basketball players. That's what they did. They played basketball and triple jumped.
Yeah. I mean,
You
and
know.
they can be really good at that. And I feel
Yeah.
like both of those things feed each other. And we had a very good girls basketball team. They ended up playing in the Final Four. They got third. And they won the third place game. They didn't win their first one, but then won the third place game.
Right.
Every one of the starters on that team was on my track and field team. And they were
Okay.
all state girls and state trophy winners in track and field. So, like, there can be a very nice marriage if the coaches play well together, and even better, maybe they coach together. And off
Yeah.
seasons is they're on that other team, and then you get those athletes
So,
together and they build a unit of competitiveness.
they're getting the
And
same messages all the time.
correct.
Yeah, that's that. I've lived that before. So, yep. So the last question of all of them here is, if you had to give some advice to a new practitioner in this field, whether it
Hmm.
be strength conditioning, performance, any kind of coaching, new folks coming in, what would it be?
Know that what you know now is going to change rapidly over the time that you coach, and don't have anxiety over that. You're going to realize as you move
'Cause-
further and further away from your initial training and education that the galaxy of human performance is so vast that you can never cover all of it, and not to be worried
Wow,
about that.
that's
And yeah. And then with that, that you need sages, people like you and people who want to give back, who are willing to share in an open format and expect nothing of you in return, and be around people who are abundant mindset, not scarcity mindset. Don't ever be afraid to ask someone to have a coffee with you, to have lunch with you, to have a man soda with you, to sit down like
yeah,
with me and have a freaking
right,
big old thing of chicken wings.
yeah,
That'll always get me to talk to you for an hour and a half and
yeah.
throw
I'm
salt
ready
in your
now.
face. But like, and then those people, they should be people that you can count on then in the future. I have asked everybody in my field that I can think of to chat, to talk. And now I've gone and tried to expand my world, into other sports as well, because I think there's a lot of connections and a
It
lot of
is.
webbing that can be done, that we can help all of each other get better. Because at the end of the day, like when we think about the future of our world, like with AI and jobs and careers and some of the stuff that's coming down the pipe, like one of the few things left that we will have to be human is to compete, to be physically active, to be in shape, so that the body that we move around in this world can allow us the time to experience the world in its totality into our elderly years. So,
And enjoy it.
yes, yes. Keep
Not
learning.
not just get through, but enjoy it.
Correct.
Listen, man. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. I appreciate everything you talked about. I know that we're gonna have to have you on again because I'm looking at my notes here, and like I think I told you, I tell everybody I don't usually um, write down questions, but as I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking, I'll say, hey, ask him this, or make little notes, and I got about 10, 12 more. But production people get mad at me if I take too much time, if I go too far with it. But look, again, I appreciate you being on, and I hope you'll come back sometime.
Yule, is my pleasure. I always enjoy sharing, and in the time that I've got, whenever my time is up, the biggest thing that I would hope that I can do is impact others and at least make them curious and interested in different ideas. So yeah, man, let's do this again. I love sharing. I love having cool conversations like this. It's exciting. It's fun, and I mean, this is what we're supposed to be about: is a life of service.
We're always better together than we ever will be apart.
Correct.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Performance Talk. My guest today has been Ryan Banta, and we've had a great time, and we'll see you next time.